So often when we talk about ME-CFS, we focus on the most difficult symptoms that it can bring, namely the post-exertional malaise and the crashes. But what we don't tend to talk about so much are the ongoing symptoms that might be occurring outside of post-exertional malaise. And these symptoms, although they may not be as severe as what occurs during PEM, can nevertheless be unpleasant and place significant limitations on our lives. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about 6 or 7 such symptoms that I often have on an ongoing basis, as well as about what these kinds of symptoms can tell us about the nature of ME-CFS. Because it's not just about the moments of exercise intolerance and post-exertional malaise. But first, my name is Patrick Usher, and I am author of the book Understanding ME-CFS and Strategies for Healing, in which I break down some of the latest, most exciting research into ME-CFS and long COVID, as well as talking about a range of treatment strategies that I have tried in order to improve my own quality of life as an ME-CFS patient. You can find links to buy the book down below, as well as to a free sample. So as I say, there are these ongoing symptoms in ME-CFS. It's not just about the crashes. There is this middle ground where things can still be unpleasant. Now, in giving you my list, I'm aware that I'm doing so from a position of someone who is relatively functional. Now, in the past, I was more ill than I am today. And I know that back then, symptoms could be, like the ongoing symptoms outside of PEM could be more unpleasant. I'm fully aware of how the spectrum of severity can affect or modify what I'm saying in this video. But I'm speaking now from the position of someone who is more functional. Unfortunately, my baseline has worsened this year, but I'm still able to live relatively okay independently. And I'm currently able to do around 5,000 steps on my good days. But all of that said, there are these ongoing symptoms that I experience, which I have come to call subtly awful symptoms. They're not like the sledgehammer of post-exertional malaise. They don't just take me down. I can still get up and go out to the shops and get what I need to get. I can still clean up the apartment. I can still manage things. They place other limitations on my life, or they're just really quite unpleasant. And so in that way they are a barrier actually having a good quality of life despite relatively okay functionality. Okay, so what are these subtly awful symptoms? Well, the first relates to the reduced blood perfusion that occurs in ME-CFS. Now this is the coming from the low blood volume, the microclots, the autoantibodies, the autonomic vascular issues, all of these things that are limiting transfer, the perfusion of blood to all of the parts of the body. And in ME-CFS, it is particularly the peripheries of the body, the extremities of the body, which are affected. This is for several reasons, but one of them is that when you have low blood volume, your body will prioritize keeping the blood in the most vital areas. That means that the skin, for example, will miss out. There will be a reduced seeping of blood into the skin, which is in the peripheries of the body. So one thing that I often feel is literally that the blood is just not getting in to everywhere that I would like it to reach. And so it's a feeling like of stagnation or a kind of block within the skin, within the muscles. Sometimes in the past, and maybe subtly now on occasion, but a lack of blood flow to the brain I can also perceive. It's just a kind of unpleasant, shitty, to pardon my French, ongoing symptom. And it comes with also like feeling colder and just like things are sort of lifeless in these more peripheral parts of the body. So that's the first one, really related to the circulatory disturbances that go on in ME-CFS. It, in and of itself, doesn't stop me from going out and doing something. It does feel very unpleasant, and it might prevent me from, for example, choosing to meet with a friend for a coffee, because it's just quite a sort of, like it draws your attention, something unpleasant that's happening in your body. As I say, it's not a sledgehammer, but it's enough to maybe prevent you doing something that you would really enjoy. A second, and somewhat related, symptom that I often experience in my daily life comes from a sudden drop in blood volume. When you have ME-CFS, and assuming you're not very mild, you usually have a reduced circulating blood volume, maybe 500 millilitres. If you're housebound, it might be a litre. And that, over time kind of settles into a certain baseline. But the nature of ME-CFS often creates sudden drops in blood volume. Now, if these happen over a longer period of time, they may lead to a further reduction in your baseline blood volume, but oftentimes these are just kind of temporary and unpleasant until your body can kind of work it out. The most common reason for a blood volume drop in ME-CFS is crashing, but there can also be more subtle reasons for why this might suddenly happen. To give 2 examples in my own case, I have to be mindful of how much salt I add to my meals. So, like these days, I often add 3 significant pinches of salt to my food. But if I forget to do that, a few hours later, I will experience a blood volume drop. Now, it wouldn't happen for someone who is healthy. Their kidneys are able to manage fluctuations in incoming salt very well, but in ME-CFS, that mechanism is blunted. And so if you're not precise in making sure you're having the right amount of salt for your situation, you can suddenly get a compensatory blood volume drop. Another example would be if I have a high carbohydrate drink. The extra glucose may lead to the body pulling out some water from the plasma when you go to the toilet, and that can cause a sudden drop in blood volume as well. But basically, whatever the reason, this can suddenly happen. I will suddenly find that when I'm walking around outside and there's maybe an incline or a few steps and I'm going up them, I suddenly get this sense of pressure in my chest because I've not got the adequate blood volume coming back up. So I might get breathless. I suddenly find myself craving salt. I feel I have low blood pressure and I suddenly get a very strong thirst. And so then I have to go back and make sure I salt my next meal. But this, can come on very quickly. It's one of these things that you have to constantly manage and be mindful of. This video is sponsored by Normalite. Now, I have been using Normalite for 3 years, and it is the most helpful supplement that I have found in managing my own condition. Like a lot of ME-CFS patients, I suffer with low blood volume, and Normalite is a highly effective strategy for combating this issue. It is a form of oral rehydration solution, and one study by Meadow et al. From 2019 found that this kind of formulation can boost blood volume as effectively as a saline IV. When I drink Normalite, I really notice the difference. I can feel the blood volume expanding throughout my body, my legs become lighter, my nervous system calms down. Even better is that Normalite has been specifically created for patients with illnesses like ME-CFS, long COVID and POTS. So check out the link below to order your own bags of Normalite. I personally enjoy the pure flavour, but it does come in a range of options. Third example of subtly awful symptoms can happen during a crash, but they can also happen when I'm more like crash-y, that kind of feeling where you're somewhat crashy but you're not actually into full-blown post-exertional malaise. But it's super common for me to feel like I have a hangover. I have not had any alcohol since 2017, so that's 8 years I haven't had any. I nevertheless often feel like I was going very strongly on the vodka shots. So I can feel like noises and light are too much, that I have all those kind of achiness that you would associate with a hangover. I suppose it's actually feasible that also related to low blood volume, at least in large part, because when someone is hungover, they also often have a drop in plasma volume because the alcohol has dehydrated them. So it could actually be that the kind of low blood volume in ME-CFS or these sudden blood volume drops may also be responsible for this. I've also noticed that, and this is more a crash-like symptom, but it can go from being not just hungover but actually to feeling drunk as well. So it's like you can get both at the same time if I'm more ill. But in general, outside of crashes, I can feel hungover. Okay, so a fourth kind of subtly awful symptom that I often experience relates to the night time and some kind of strange neurological dysregulation that perhaps occurs just when I'm trying to go to sleep. It's very hard to describe. It's like my brain suddenly becomes very vacant, maybe somehow more sensitive to subtle noises that are ongoing, like for example the whirring of a fridge suddenly becomes not aggravating but somehow more noticeable, and I can sort of just lie there for quite some time feeling this vacancy in my brain, and somehow it seems to prevent me from sleeping. Now, this has got better over the years. It used to be much stronger in the earlier years, and these days it often doesn't necessarily take me that long to go to sleep, but it's often something that just kind of pops up at night for whatever reason. Seems to be some sort of neurological lack of equilibrium, but it's something that I often experience. And then fifthly, and very commonly, are cognitive dysfunction, the brain fog, difficulties finding words. I can struggle in conversations with people because it actually is hard to generate thoughts and kind of responses to what they're saying, and I have to really dig very deep to try and find the right things to say. It also ties in with issues I've developed around kind of sociability, or like not feeling like myself when I'm talking to other people, like kind of flat emotionally. But cognitive dysfunction, difficulty finding words, coming out with the wrong thing in terms of just making some sort of mistake, just English grammar or words. And often for these videos I have a lot of outtakes actually. Some days, if I'm shooting a video that's 15 minutes, there might be 2 or 3 minutes of me actually just making brain farts, making mistakes, making up words as I go along. And so that is another issue that I struggle with cognitively. And I'm often surprised that I do produce, it's often like I feel like since I became ill, I'm not sure where my thoughts are coming from, because it's this sort of fog. But nevertheless, they can come out and they can be coherent, but it's sometimes a bit of a surprise to me. And finally, number 6 relates to symptoms of dryness. So since I became ill, I'm dry, I sweat less, I produce less saliva, I produce less moisture in the eyes, I struggle to cry. And this for me is, again, it's subtle, but it's quite awful, because it's very nice to be able to sweat. It's important to be able to cry, It's not nice to have a dry mouth. And again, these symptoms have got somewhat better over the years, but they're likely caused by autoantibodies that I have, which affect the moisture-producing glands. I feel like they may also be caused actually by the blood hypoperfusion. That hypoperfusion again is limiting flow of blood to the extremities, and so things kind of dry up in the skin. Whatever the cause, it's been something that I struggle with. I have kind of paper dry skin, and it's just an ongoing, unpleasant reminder of not being very well. So those are my 6, roughly speaking, categories or range of symptoms that I struggle with, often on an ongoing basis. Now, sometimes some of these will lift, and sometimes I do things that help them to lift, like the Buteyko breathing method. If I'm practicing that, which improves blood perfusion, I can literally kind of reverse some of these symptoms in a short period of time. But in general, they're often there. They remind me that I'm sick, and they're not pleasant things to deal with on a daily basis. And I think what they speak to is, I regard these kinds of symptoms generally, they're like the sort of baseline ME-CFS state, which is present all the time, which in and of itself is what the crashes will come out of. So we have the low blood volume ongoing, we have these symptoms as a result, just as an example. That low blood volume, of course, has reduced the exercise capacity, so that when you do too much, you then go into the crash because your body doesn't have enough blood to work with. The actual genesis, what can create the crash, is of course present on an ongoing basis. It has to be that way. So these kind of more subtle symptoms are just manifestations of my baseline ME-CFS body. And that very same baseline, what makes exercise so hard, what the crashes will actually come out of when you do push this ME-CFS body just a bit too far. So that's pretty much it for this video. I wonder, do you resonate with the idea of subtly awful symptoms that may be ongoing, things that don't necessarily, take you down, but which do actually impact your life, which do actually stop you from doing certain things? And, if you like, maybe to write down in the comments what kind of subtly awful symptoms you have that you have to deal with on a regular basis. So, I hope this video was helpful. Please check out my website, patrickusher.com. Please check out my recently launched Patreon and Discord community, research and treatment support community, where there's a Discord channel for very focused exchanging of tips and strategies for improving quality of life, where we have monthly Zoom calls to swap tips and experiences with ME-CFS treatments. The links for that are down below. It's just getting off the ground now, but there's about 12-15 people who have joined already, and I hope it will grow further over the course of the year.